and we'll get started. Okay, we're live. Yeah, so pull the latest from the classroom repo. It has just a file for today's homework. I am trying to catch up on the homework. I'm like writing the homework into the Google Classroom. The weekend project, just, I won't have it written up until right after class because I'm just trying to do the homework for tonight so that I can, but give me like 25 seconds and I'll be done. Let's do, everything is officially due on May 2nd for this week. It's, again, of course, not a big deal whether you're turning it in late or not. We're just please asking that, you try to do as much of the homework as you can, and really turn in stuff, because this really is how we can tell what we need to spend more time on. And, whether we're going to need to give you a heads up that, like, you need to work on some concept that's going to come up again later that's you're going to need for your capstone or whatever. So please do the homework, which I'm trying to make it short, unless you get stuck, which is fine. But if you get stuck, it's fine to just turn in, I got stuck. That's totally okay. I'd much rather have that piece of information than we don't know whether you've done it or not. So yeah. So, okay. So this is the homework for tonight. We'll go over this in a bit. It's going to be an HTML page that has JavaScript and interacts with the page. And it's a very straightforward, it's a very doing one thing on that. So it's not a huge amount of, and the page is already written. So it should not take that long, but it's bringing JavaScript into now the browser environment. So it's going to be a new thing. And if you get stuck on it, that's totally fine. All right. Yeah, and the weekend project, I think I need to write it up, but what we're going to do is basically say, tonight's homework is going to be an HTML page that has some JavaScript that makes a thing change on the page. Very simple way. The weekend project is just going to do something like that, add some JavaScript to one of your capstone pages. So you should have, just a base. It doesn't have to be a finished page, but just one of your just an HTML page that has some basic stuff on it that you have that you're working on for your capstone. Add some JavaScript following the patterns that we'll see today, and try to make it do something on the page. It doesn't have to be as fancy as making the head go around in the circle or anything, but like just any, try to start, just dip your toes into having JavaScript code that interacts with things on a web page. And, I'll try to point out some little bits that you're going to need. There's only a couple of bits you might need to just get started wiring that stuff together. So we'll go over that briefly, but yeah, Karen, you.
Yeah, what I was going to say is one of the things that might help you do that, implement that into your HTML, is to put in your, like, what your wireframe is. Just add a comment like, hey, I need a function here, because I need it to do this. That might help you decide where in your HTML code you want to put the JavaScript.
Yeah, and feel, definitely come to office hours with something, a wireframe or your code, and ask questions, because the point of this one is not to get stuck or to be a puzzle or something that's supposed to stump you. We're just really trying to say the assignment this weekend is going to be, start trying the most basic thing you can think of to add some JavaScript that controls your an HTML page, and get used to that. And of course, I think once we get to the React stuff. There's going to be different ways of doing a lot of that. You might not want to keep it for your final capstone. But it's good practice, and it's going to give you a better sense of what the real relationship is going to be between the JavaScript that runs your programs and does functions and does all kinds of dynamic behaviors, and your pages, which are going to describe kind of the layouts and how things look. So yeah, just getting some, comfort, starting to build some comfort with that is the goal for this weekend. Okay. So, I mean, how's everyone feeling? What's your appetite for some slides today? We've got some more stuff. We got a couple more things. There's nothing crazy like this nonsense, but there's a couple more cool things, tricky things. And then I think for today's example, why don't we just go ahead and try making a React app? I don't know if Joey will get mad at me that I'm kind of spoiling the first try with the React, but I think it's sort of like a reward. Like you've earned, seeing something else happen on the page and seeing where you might be headed, and kind of seeing this kind of light at the end of the tunnel here. So that's kind of what I'm just going to choose to do here. And we're not going to get very far into it, but I'll just show you some neat things you can do right off the bat that can make a cool little interactive web page. So we'll do that as our exercise today, if that sounds good. If there's anything else you want to cover before, I'll be in office hours on Saturday, of course, but if there's anything else you want to cover today, throw it in the chat. And otherwise, I'll see you in office hours, and I'll see you later on in a much later module. So weeks and weeks from now, I guess. So I got to figure out when that is and start getting my material ready for that too. So, all right, let's do some topics, some slides. Okay. All right, so the new thing today, we're going to talk about code. We're going to talk about JavaScript code modules, software modules. What is a module in general? It's sort of like a thing. It's one container of code stuff. So you have a program, that's all the code that you run, and you have code that's grouped into blobs of code. And that could be a function, but above that is like a module. It's like just a collection of related code that you sort of organize together in a group. That's really all it means. In the way that we're going to see this by the end of, the newest way, and the way you'll be doing it with any Node program you write and any React app you write, it's going to be basically that every JS file is going to be a module. And today we're going to start seeing how one JavaScript file can have some code in it, and then you can put different code in a different file, and you can actually say from one JavaScript file to import the code from the other one. We saw something like this with the require keyword when we installed some package to do our card decks and things like that. That's a way to get code from a module. It's just a module like any other, but you can make your own to organize your code into more than one file. And when you get into bigger JavaScript applications and doing stuff with React, you're going to be putting your code into a lot of different files. And the idea is that it's not all just one long list of code, and it makes it easier to understand and easier to find the thing you want to be working on or looking at. Okay, so before we can really talk about modules, we're going to talk about sort of the tradition, the oldest way. This is a bit of a history lesson. We need to talk about closures. Now, you've all seen what these do, what the effects are. And I don't know. I don't know if anybody really noticed that this is a weird thing. We just kind of assumed that it was happening. But we're going to point out what happens because it's important for understanding how this kind of historical module, this old pattern for making code modules used to work. Okay. A closure is a fancy programming word for saying that functions that are declared or assigned to variables. So remember, a variable can have a value that is a function. It's some process, something. It's not like just a number. These function values can actually have kind of a memory. They can kind of remember details about the environment where that function value was created, even things that are not inside the body of the function. So like, for example, if we have like some kind of fancy higher order factory function, and we return a function as the return value from another function. We saw one example of this. We'll show another one. Any variables that inner, when you say return this new function, any variables that function could see where that function was created will stay usable no matter where you return that thing to. If you use that function later on, it will remember what the context that it was created in. And this concept is called a closure. Function values, effectively, it's called close over anything that they need to in their environment. So anything that they might want to interact with, they remember it for later, even if they are now in a different place. They've been assigned to a variable, moved around, assigned to different variables. And so here's kind of like, here's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't know, we saw something like this with like an add function. It returns another function. And basically you call this first function multiplier. You give it the first number to multiply. And this function returns another function. This is like, this is a function that multiplies by whatever you originally passed to this function. So we can create a multiply by 2 function by calling this questionably named, I think I'd name this multiplier factory or something like that. Or get a multiplier or something like that. Multiplier factory, I don't know. But whatever you pass to this function is going to be bound to this argument, which is basically a local variable. It's basically the same thing as, let. It's like a let, and it's now bound to a new name inside this function. And what it returns is another function. It's going to remember the thing that you passed in, even though it came from here. When you call this and pass it the value 2, the function it returns here is going to remember the number 2. And then if you call multiply by 2 and you pass this number, it's going to remember the original one that was used to create this. And it's going to be able to multiply 5 by 2.
Mal has a question.
Yes.
He wants to know if it's the same as a private function.
Not really. Man, a private function, it's like in like C++ or something where you're saying that a class has, in C++, you can say a class has certain functions that only other things in that class can see, right? It's similar, and we're going to show how we're going to show how this pattern is used to achieve basically what you're talking about, a private function. But I'm not sure, like the concept of closure itself is one of those kind of academic things. It's just the fact that the function is remembering its environment. It's used to achieve that, what you're talking about, but it's not the same thing. Difference, I wonder if anyone's like explained this. Closure, and I don't know if anyone's actually, so there's a bunch of like, yeah, you can read about closures on the MDN, private variables. I mean, they're similar. See, like there's people who kind of, you'll find them in the same discussions, emulating private closures and factory functions. Yeah, so we'll basically it can do what you're talking about, and we'll show the example of that, and that is called immediately invoked function expressions and the revealing module pattern. This was a joke. These are both real things. It's not a joke, and this is sort of the original way of doing software modules in JavaScript, and this was big for a while. So here's the example we can consider. We have a function here, which is going to be used to build our revealing module. And the fact, so what an immediately invoked function expression means is that we have a function here. It has no name, by the way. We're assigning this eventually to a variable, but we're not assigning the function itself to the variable. This function expression is run right away as soon as we create it. So we make a function expression, we run it right away, and whatever it returns is going to be the value of this whole expression once we run the function. So whatever it returns is going to be assigned to weekday. But in the process of doing that, in the process of running this, returning this, and assigning what it returns back here, we have been able to run whatever code we want inside. Number one, we've been able to set up anything we want inside. Number two, any functions that are in the thing we return. So if we return a function, it can see whatever's in this context because of the concept of closure. So in this case, we return an interface for our module, basically, which is an object, and it has two methods, two keys, which are functions, and these each can look at the variable inside this outer function called names. These can see and access and even change what's inside here. But because they're not returned from this function, and because this function is only run once and then has no name, is not bound to anything else, everything here is completely invisible to the outside world. Everything here, everything you return is, because it's now weekday. So this achieves basically the same thing. Names here is effectively now a private property, or private, it's a private variable, because nothing can access names because we're not returning anything that is names plural here. So this is effectively, if you're, I think Mel, you might have heard about this in C++ or some other language, but this is like a private property or a private variable. And because, again, because these functions remember where they were created, they remember this thing, they're able to interact with this thing, but this thing itself is not visible. So we can control, the important thing that makes it a useful module is we can put complexity. We can use different names for things that we might reuse in other modules. We can make very complicated interconnected code that only does, that does one thing, but only needs to be called at 1 or 2 points to do 1 or 2 overall things. And then we just return those things that the outer world needs to know about and nothing else. And that helps to kind of like, it's called encapsulation. This is a principle that is, if you just look up encapsulation software, this is a principle and it's been claimed by object-oriented programming people. So this is much more good of a principle than building your program with inheritance. I don't like inheritance. I think that's silly, but encapsulation and being able to contain complexity in somewhere and only expose this surface area that the rest of the program needs to know about. It's called its interface, is a very useful pattern. This keeps the rest of your program from being overwhelmed by having to remember all the details. And then choosing what to expose in the interface and choosing what to keep inside each module is a very difficult practice. I mean, that's where all of the actual real programming thinking comes sometimes when you're architecting like a large software system. You need to plan, what does each module need to be able to know about? Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to say we are going to read this, but if you want to look up encapsulation, this is the principle that we're talking about when we say this has been encapsulated. It's been hidden away. We can still interact with it in the way we need to. In this case, it converts a weekday name into the index of that weekday and vice versa. And these are the names of these are so confusing, and this is not I have a problem with whoever named all this stuff, but this is taken right from I think this is from the MDN page. Anyway, okay. Yeah, outside of the immediately invoked function expression, the rest of the program can't access anything except the interface that is returned. So this was basically like the way to do modules in JavaScript for a while. And you would just have files that you load in script tags in your page, and the files could each, have one of these that is their interface. And they would just make them global variables. They would just not even put a const. So the rest of the page, the whole world can see each of these modules, but they wouldn't necessarily collide with each other because you have like one per file and you name them very carefully and you organize them very carefully. And that's how you would organize a large JavaScript program with just script files that you just load right into an HTML page in the old days. Okay. So since then, there have been a lot of different patterns of modules. There's AMD modules and require modules and all this other stuff. But the ones that we're going to talk about, because these are really the only ones that are that relevant right now, are node modules. So we've already kind of seen some of these. And ES6 modules. These are the ones when you're building a React app or building code for a browser, not Node, the pattern is different. But the idea is basically the same. And that is, node modules are files. Each file is a module. Node modules or files each have their own scope. Remember, we said there's global scope, there's function scope, there's block scope. And oh, by the way, node modules each have their own scope. There's module scope. It didn't matter before because all of our programs were in one single file. So it was the same as saying global scope. I mean, there's only one file, they were the same. But actually, each node module has its own scope. And what that means is you get the same result as you do with everything being private and being able to publish an interface. You just do it in a different way. It's much less complicated. I mean, this just looks very tricky. It's like a whole function, you're running it, returning it, and blah, blah, blah. It's a very kind of clever way to do this. But node modules work much simpler. Yeah, they can import code from other modules or files. They can import code from the packages you get from NPM. Those are just files too. They're just ones you download and then you can import code from. Node, a program, when you run it with Node, you still always run one module or file to start. We still do node scratch.js or whatever our start file is. And this is usually identified in the package.json file as what's called the main file. So this would be the file that starts your program, that loads the code from other files, and that sort of is the top level organization of your program. Okay, so here's how Node modules will export and then import their code. Now, module.exports, it's just some magic thing that works in Node when you're running code in Node. And you assign an object to this magic property and this magic thing called module.exports. And this becomes the interface to your module. Just like the object you return from this is the interface, this is just you assign to this magic module.exports thing. Same idea though. And then when you require, remember the require thing was for prompt sync and all of that. When you require from some module, and this would be a file right in the same folder. We'll do this, we'll demonstrate this in a second. When you require from that file, you're going, this expression will evaluate to this object that you exported from the other file. So other will now have a blah method, and we can call it then from the file that imported. So let's do that. Yeah, I'm classroom code base. Oh, I have a bunch of changes. I will discard these. Fetch the origin, make sure we're in the right branch. We got the book. And okay, so here, this index.html, we can ignore this for the most of the class. This is where the homework is. So the homework is to edit a script to actually do something on a page. And yeah, I'll talk about that before the end of class. But let's just treat this folder like sort of like an empty sandbox for today. We have W7D4 web scripting, I guess. I don't know why I called it that. I guess because the homework is a web page. Okay. Carolyn, it's up to you. This is not going to be super fast. Yeah, you know, if you want to code along, go ahead. The pace is not going to be super fast, but I'm going to create 2 JavaScript files now in this folder. So I'm going to say control, click on it, new file. I'll say main.js or index.js. And then I will, sorry, I don't like that. I don't like that they're named the same because they're not related at all. So sorry, I'm going to change it again. Control, click on the file name, scroll down to rename, and I'm going to call this main. Why not? Main is fine. And then I'm going to do one more file. And these don't have to be the same names. You just would have to import from the name that you name your file. But I'm going to do control, click on this folder, do new file, and do other-file.js. So we have main.js and other-file. Now, other file, this is our other module. We want to import some code from here. So we're going to copy right from this example. This is like what other file might have in it. Now, this could have anything. Const foo equals 1, const bar equals 2. It can do things. You can run functions. You can call functions. But this module.exports is the interface to our module. This is the only thing that other modules that import from here or require from here in Node are going to be able to see. So we'll put a blah function, and this returns foo. So foo is like, we can return it, but we can't set it. We can't assign anything to it from outside of this module. It's basically read-only, because the only thing we can do is return it, and it's a value type. So if somebody assigns a different value to whatever outside of this, it doesn't matter. This will always be 1. So our interface has one method on it. Let's just say bar. Let's just return bar in the interface too. Why not? Okay, so we have our exports. We have this, which is actually returning this, which is 2, and then a function, which is going to return 1. Now, in the main.js file, we put the other half. So below this dotted line is the other file, or is the main file, which imports from other file. I'll copy this. And we use our require statement. So we say require /other file. And that means this same directory, so the same directory that this module is in, / which is, this is just how to say in the same directory, I want to find a module called other file. Now you can put the JS, that's fine because it does have a JS, but Node doesn't care. You can leave it off and it will just assume, well, it's going to be JS because everything's JS if it's a Node module. And then we'll log the blah property, which, see, actually, VS Code is smart enough to understand that it has, the other has bar and blah. It's actually looked at the other file and can tell that we have two properties on this interface. So if I log other.blah and I'll run, oh, I'm in the wrong folder. See, careers in code, classroom code base. So I need to do control click on web scripting, W7D4, open an integrated terminal and run from here. So I'll do node main.js. And it's going to log the result of running the function that we got from the other file. Now I could log bar. And that's going to log 2. Now here's an interesting thing. Let's say this returns bar. So we have bar itself and then a function that returns bar. Now you might think that if I said other.bar equals 3 and then I log other.bar, it's going to be 3. And I think you would be right. Okay. Now, if I do other.bar equals 4, or, whatever, and I console.log other.blah, which remember now returns bar, what do you think that's going to be? It's tricky. It's not 4. It's still 2. Now that's because bar is a value type. It's a number. Bar is a value type. So a number is assigned to bar. Numbers are passed by value. So bar is 2, bar here is 2, but this bar is a different variable than this bar, and each one has the value 2. It's linked directly to the value 2. So when I change this later from outside somewhere, this one is a different it's a different variable, and it still has the same value. If I make bar into an object, and this is A1, we don't even need foo anymore. So bar is still bar, and blah will return bar.a. How about that? So bar.a. You might see where I'm going with this, but if I say other.bar.a equals 3, and then log blah, which is going to return bar.a, and it starts as 1, but we're going to set it to 3 and then return it. Now it's 3. Now blah is returning 3, which is bar.a, which is this one. And again, that's because now bar is an object, and objects are reference types. So we say that bar is this object. Well, bar is a reference to this object. So this bar is a reference to the same object, and this bar is a reference to the same object. So all 3 of these are references to the same object, and when you alter a property on that same object, it alters it everywhere. So again, just that's more of that pass by value, pass by referenceness. And this is there's examples that don't rely on modules, but I guess what I'm saying is that it's sort of safe to export a number directly. It can't mess with anything internally in your program. But if you export like an object or an array directly in your interface, then something outside it can reach in and alter like values ultimately that are inside objects that are references in your thing. So generally, maybe yeah, I don't know, like, yeah. This is a contrived example. I don't know where this would happen, but if you wanted to like be safer or to make sure to guarantee that nothing can change bar, you would want to not return it itself. Nothing can change, the stuff in bar. You'd want to, make sure not to return it in the interface. And you'd want to say like, adjust a value in bar. And you'd want to say, this function would, or get a value in bar. You'd want to basically make the interface only functions that can return the values or whatever. And you'd never want to give the outside module a reference to the same object if you needed it to be unchangeable by other modules. And you would say set a value in bar. And it's kind of like a getter and a setter. And I think a class, you can do getters and setters in those fake classes in the constructor, and you can sort of simulate that kind of private variable stuff. I think, is there even the word private now? JavaScript class private variable. Private class fields. Yikes. That's crazy. Okay. Class properties are public by default. There is a stage 3 proposal. Oh, the TC39 is up to it again. They're piling on more complicated stuff. Now you got to remember that there are weird looking private fields that start with the hash for some reason. Okay. I didn't need to know that. All right. Anyway, you could have a getter kind of thing and a setter kind of thing. This would accept an argument and set it to A. So you can control more carefully what the external, whoops, I need a comment. You can control more carefully like what things outside this module can do. And I wouldn't worry about it too much. Like this kind of stuff, like colliding stuff, it tends to happen as your program gets bigger and grows. Like, so to get started, don't worry about it too much. I think if you are doing code review with a mentor, they will be able to point out like, hey, you might want to watch out here because this is a risky thing to do. Hopefully before it becomes a problem. And if it does, you get stuck, ask for help. And it's a good challenge to debug. Okay. So that's really just how node modules work. You assign to module exports like this, and then you require in the other module. ES6 modules. Code that runs in a web browser, like React code. It's usually organized with ES6 modules. It's just a different kind of module. They're still files. Each module is still a file. Modules still import from other modules or files. Modules can still import from NPM packages that export, ES6 modules, which is, I think, most of them. And when you use stuff like Webpack and everything, it kind of figures out even stuff that does require style or node style. You can often just import and export from that, and it's totally fine. The way you do export and import, though, when you're working in like a React project, it's done with a different style. It looks like this. Instead of assigning to one magic thing that's called module.exports, you use a export keyword. So you can do two kinds of things: export default and then something, or just export. And the thing that you export has to really have a name. And then the way that you import it is if you say import just a thing from the module you want, that's the default. So whatever the default, it actually doesn't matter what it's called. It could be called this, but you named it something else. Because there's no that stuff around it, it's the default export. And I'm going to set this back when I'm done. But if neither one of these was the default, you could export both, but you'd have to do it by name. So, and you could separate by comma like this to export two things that are named from the that's on purpose. Yeah, they're two different things. Sorry, they're both badly named. Blah and blah. Yeah. Okay, why don't we call this one by default, and then blah. Okay. So it doesn't matter what it's named up here again when you go to import it, because if it doesn't have the curly braces, it's going to try to import the thing that you said export default for. And if you do put some curly braces and you give it something in there, or many things separated by commas, it's going to be looking for something with that name. So variable two, but that has just the keyword export, not default. So we'll do this example in when we set up a little React application to play around with today. Okay. Yeah, and then I just explained this. So let me change these two, because you're right, it's confusing. So export is these words, the imports are these kinds of things. And that's the same kind of thing as with node modules. when you're doing a file in the same folder, it's a // the name. If it's outside, if it's in a parent folder, it's actually .. And if it's like in a sibling folder, it would be sibling /. So this is like out to the parent folder and then into a different folder and the module in that folder. And if you are using NPM packages, you don't put any // you just give it the name, like we saw with prompt sync or with the decks, the card decks. It's just the name, no // So Carolyn, in this example, we are exporting from other file and importing in main, but this example is the node style, so this uses the require. And in this one, we are exporting from where it says export and importing from where it says import. Now, you can also export a const like this. So it doesn't have to be a function. This could just be a number that you're exporting. I don't know exactly why, but you might export like, a size that you want to be a standard width of your toolbar or something. You just want to export that, give as a named size, as a named constant. That's fine. So you can do it like this. Now you can't export default const anything just because of the way the JavaScript parser works. You can't export default and define a const variable or a let and assign to it all in the same line. You can do it without the default there. So if you see it when you're trying to export default const blah, 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 you can't do that. Only a non-default can do that. So to do that with a default, all you have to do is just assign in one line and export default in a different line. It's a little annoying sometimes. You want to just be able to say, hey, I know I'm going to export default this. That's all it is. But you can't export default and declare a const and assign to it or at all in the same line. But you can if it's not the default. So yeah. Okay, we'll look at the import and export style a little bit when we'll do a practice React application, which will use that import and export style. All right, so another thing, so I want to go through some array methods that we didn't cover before. And I want to do them by running through some free code camp exercises. There's a whole bunch of cool ones. And I think like, yeah, I'm gonna, oh man, the TC39 people, they're probably fine people or whatever. I'm sure they're trying to do the right thing, but it's like, it's a bunch of, people who are like, they all work at Google and Apple and Microsoft and they all get together and just have ridiculous arguments about what they want next in JavaScript. And then they load up a bunch of crap into JavaScript like every couple of years. And some of it's good, some of it's really good, but it's usually hit or miss, and then you have to basically explain what all the weird stuff is. So as a teacher, I don't like the TC39. They make things hard. But this is why JavaScript is such a popular language, is because it's developed in cooperation with all of these companies. So, I mean, on the other side, if it wasn't like that, nobody would care about it. Like it wouldn't even be run anywhere. And, there's, you could say that there's a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts. And this is a very famous book. And for some reason, it's still not public domain, but I'll paste this in the class. Uh-oh, I think I just broadcast the Zoom password to YouTube. We should probably change it. I'm going to tell Jesse to change it. Anyway. Yeah. So this here is a very famous book. And this person was like, all of this stuff that's weird. I'm pretty sure he was saying don't do the prototypes and the stuff, blah blah blah. But like was identifying like the kind of like the parts where JavaScript is a really, really nice language. And this book kind of on its own is what turned around JavaScript from being almost like a sideshow. Like this was back in the days when there was Flash applications and Java applets and things like that. It turned JavaScript from being kind of almost like a toy into like a serious thing because people started taking it seriously after this book. And it is a very good book. Now, obviously, there's a million new things in JavaScript since this book. So it almost like we need another one, like JavaScript, the new, the good parts now. But nobody's written that one. So, yeah. Anyway. Yeah, so let's do some more array methods. But first, I guess I want to do this last bit first, because I just want to talk a little bit about what's going to come up in the next 2 weeks. I want to not to like scare anybody. I just want to kind of try to reiterate some of the things we might have seen and get you a little bit thinking about it, just so it's kind of bouncing around in your head a little bit, because the first couple times you see this, it's going to be tricky. And this is maybe the hardest thing left in fundamental JavaScript. And that is async programming or asynchronous programming. Pretty much all the examples that we've seen so far in the last 2 weeks are synchronous programming. What that means is the execution of your program goes in the order that you would read the code. So you read this line, well, the computer executes that line. Then you read the next line, the computer executes that line, and so forth. Line by line, down the program, just like you read it, except for when you call a function, it might jump up to the top of that function. And when it's done with the function, it jumps back to where you were, and it keeps going. So those jumps when entering, exiting functions is the only time the program doesn't go tick, 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 tick down the page like that. But as we saw in that Lady Gaga example thing, when we tried to make that loop add a bunch of text, remember we were doing blah, 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 and having it keep adding more text. The synchronous version of that, when we said freeze the browser, freeze the JavaScript, keep trying a while loop forever until 1 second has passed, and then do another blah, and then keep trying a while loop again over and over until 1 second has passed, and do another blah. That freezes the browser. The browser can't even update when you're doing that because it hasn't had the chance to, your code hasn't, it's called yielded execution. It's still running all the time, and it's doing exactly that. It's going do back to the while loop, do. Oh, while loops have or in loops. I forgot about that. Loops control flow. Yeah, there's little jumps when it jumps back to the top of a for loop or back to the top of a while loop, or if it jumps over the if else case that it doesn't hit. Anyway, sorry about that. While it's doing that, it's all synchronous. It's this and then this and then this and then this, jump to the top, this and then this and then this. And it does all of that in order so strictly that it never takes a break and says, hey, let me redraw the page and add one more piece of text that I can actually see. Most of the time in like Node.js environments and even in like web environments, when you're loading something from the server, people often prefer an asynchronous style, a style where it doesn't always follow exactly along as you would read it, or where there are effectively jumps in places that are not only to go into a function or to go back to the top of a loop. Other kinds of things where it pauses, does something else, and then comes back. We use the prompt sync module in the examples, and that's synchronous. That's like the one that doesn't do asynchronous. Node.js stuff often prefers async. The prompt by itself without sync at the end is the more standard way to prompt for input, and that is an asynchronous pattern. Okay, what does asynchronous programming look like though? Well, the examples we've seen are that set interval or set timeout when we were playing with the Lady Gaga Twitter. They are asynchronous style programming. These are functions. I don't know if you remember that, but it's like this. Set interval is a function that takes another function, and you notice the name of this function is called callback, and this is the first method of basic asynchronous program you're going to learn about. They take this callback argument, and what that means is it's sort of like a function to call later. So you call the function just like you call any other function. You run that function, but you're going to call later, so it's called a callback, like call me back, or I don't know, something like that. And the first parameter is this callback function, the thing to run later. And the second one is how long to wait. And for interval, it's going to do it every 1 second or 10 seconds. And for timeout, it will only do it once. This is asynchronous programming because the stuff inside here is not going to run right away. It's not going to run as the program goes tick, 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 tick. It's not running at all here because you're just declaring a function. You're just saying, hey, here's a function. And it goes, okay. It doesn't run it. It runs it later. So your program ends, it goes all the way to the end, whatever else happens. And then 10 seconds later, boom, run the function. So it could have come from anywhere. It's basically you're just picking up at any point and running this code later. And so anything you wanted to happen at this point has to happen inside the function. That's where the kind of asynchronous programming starts to be tricky, is that the stuff later is not at the bottom of the page anymore always. It's stuff inside various functions that are these kinds of functions that you want to run later. And there are techniques that make it kind of look like it's going toward the bottom of the page that make this a little easier, but you're going to have to, at some point, kind of wrestle with this idea that, the end of the program is not the bottom of the page if you're doing this style. The end of the program could be inside some function somewhere that was called minutes later or days later. And that's just basically what it is. So that's a callback function. That's just a classic kind of asynchronous pattern. It leads to something called callback hell. There's actually a name for this, callback hell. And so it's not in favor as the first style that people use for asynchronous program. There are other styles based on what's called a promise. It's like you return a value that is not yet the value, but it's a promise to get the value later. And you think of it like that. And then there's also a newer thing. This is, I think, stolen from C#, but there's async and await. So you use new keywords to say, do this thing asynchronously, and then somewhere else you say, wait for this thing asynchronously. And that allows you to do the same thing in a way that leads to less, callbacks. Basically, callback hell is like callback and then another callback inside that, and then another callback. It's like first do this and then do the inner one and then do the inner one. And eventually your code is like indented like this far in. And that's what that means. Okay. So again, yeah, this is just banging your head against this week because it will help you a little bit the next time and then the next time. And you'll see, this will start to make more sense when you have more concrete examples of it. But it's basically going to be, defining functions and defining code that runs later, not immediately where it is on the page. Okay. Let's, do you want to break now and then let's do some of these these array methods? Or do you want to do some of these first? We'll break at 7 and then do some React stuff after that. How about that? All right. Okay, so this link in the slides, it goes to, this is the middle of the functional programming module. So this is after the basic array module. And this is, we've talked a little bit about functional programming, but this is when you pass functions to functions or return from them. And the most basic one that we've seen before is like, we map. And this takes one array and runs every element through this function and gives you a new array with all the return values. So this would multiply everything by 2 and give you 2, 4, 6. That's functional programming. And that's an array method that we've seen, the map method. Okay, let's just look at some of these. The slice method. So this is this is a weird way to pose this question because I think what they want you to do, slice array, gives you an array, it gives you a number to start at and a number to end at. And are you just supposed to call anim.slice 1, 3? Is that right? Use the slice method to return part of the anim array given the provided begin slice. The function should return an array. So we return this. Okay, so 1, 4 should return dog, tiger, zebra. 1, 4. 0, 1. Oh, whoops. I just put 1 and 3 in here. It should be begin and end. This is a bit weird of a way to type this, but yeah, you're slicing the array by calling the slice method from begin to end. 1, 3 should return dog, tiger. Whoops. I forgot the E. Well, that's all they wanted you to do is call slice. I don't know why you would ever define a function like this because it's already this. It's already a function on the array. So anyway, we can probably say log. Can we console log in here? I think so. Okay, so you save it. No. This is odd. How do you just run it? Oh, reset it. No. How do you just run the code and get my log? I don't know. Okay, so I guess every time I edit this and save it, it'll give me my console.log. So this method is a method you call in an array. This array, we slice from 1 to 3. You see how it's dog and tiger because the first argument is the index of the first element you want to return. But the second one is the index after the end of the array. So you basically are saying, here's index 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 1 to 3 means 1 just before 1, basically, to just before 3. So this is index 3. It's just before to before. So basically, yeah, you will get the number of the size you'll get back will be this minus this, but it's a little odd because you won't get array index 3 in your slice. It'll be just before it, and that's how that works. Whoops. So 1 to 4, and I just did Command S, and it reruns it down here when I edit this and do Command S. So that's an interesting way to test things. You can console.log in FreeCodeCamp. You would use this if, like, let's say you had a list of appointments. So you download somebody's calendar, and they have a list of appointments for, you know, the whole year or something. You fetch all of this from the API at once. And it's like an array where it's like every day is one element in the array. And you want to basically render on the screen just like 1 week at a time. So you say this week and then the next week. You would find the start and end of that week. You would convert it to the position in the array, and then you can slice out a piece of that array to show. I don't know if that's the best example, but like whenever you have like a larger kind of amount of things inside the guts, inside your JavaScript, and you would want to just show one page at a time, that would be a place you would slice out one page at a time. So that's the slice method. I guess we need to do okay. Okay. This is a typo. This is backwards. Remove elements from an array using splice instead of slice. That's what they mean. So splice is oh wait, never mind. Okay, never mind. They are saying don't use splice, use slice. Because here's how this works. I'm just gonna use this to do some code here. And when we save it, we should be able to console.log. If I do const sum cities equals input cities dot splice 2, 3, and then I console.log sum cities, and I console.log input cities, we can see that splice is a different pattern. It says it actually can take 3 arguments, and this is an actual splice. Basically, it's something you only want to use if you want to manipulate and change the array that you're working with. So you only call splice on an array that you actually want to modify. If you did this to get your week of appointments, you would end up basically slurping that week out of the rest of your application, and then it would change the next time you tried to view that week, because you would have changed by pulling that stuff out with splice. You would have changed your original array. So this is like if you want to alter the array. And Brandy, I think this was where, if you're here, this was where we wanted to pull the color out each time you picked a color at random, you wanted to remove that from the array so that it couldn't be picked again, so that each color could only be picked once. That's a time you would want to modify the array, and that would be a use for splice. The arguments for splice are different. This is the starting index. And this is the number of elements to pull out of your array. And then I think the last argument is you could say, I want to replace one with Syracuse. No, I guess maybe it's only, okay, so it works like this. You start at index 2. So starting here, just before the item at index 2, you want to remove 3 items here. And that becomes the return value. So that's some cities, we get those 3 items, and they're our first thing we log, those 3 items. And then at the end, you can pass one more argument to splice, something to drop in instead. And actually, I guess you can do this as much as you want. So any items to drop in place are going to be the arguments after that to splice. And you can have as many as you want, I think. So if we started at 1 and did 3, we would get Delhi, Islamabad, London spliced out. And then we drop in these 2 in place. So Chicago, Syracuse, Rochester, Berlin. So this is it's a very powerful method of manipulating arrays, but generally you don't want to do this just to grab a section of an array for displaying or something. You only want to do this if your intent really is to manipulate the array. Otherwise, you want to use slice. Okay. Oh, we got to solve this one to go to the next one, I guess. What is the rewrite the function by using slice instead of splice? Slice. Chicago, Delhi, Islamabad, London, Berlin should return. Okay. Provided cities array and return array with only the first 3 items. So this would be 0, 3 if it's slice instead of splice. Okay, so those are tricky because the arguments mean totally different things for slice and splice, and they're so similar sounding. So those ones suck. Slice is the one you want to use most of the time. It's safer. Okay. Another one that joins together 2 arrays. So instead of pushing, let's say you had one array and another array. One thing I could do is second dot for each first dot push x. So I'm looping through the second one, and for each one, I am adding it to the end one at a time. Boop, boop, 4 and 5. And then if I log it, I'll see all 5. Now, if you know that you just have 2 arrays and you just want to stick them together, you don't have to do this. You can just say first concat second. And this expression will be the value of the first everything in the first one added to the end of the second one. Or sorry, everything in the second one added to the end of the first one. Now, it does not alter. So if I call first.concat second on its own and don't do anything with it, it doesn't alter first or second. So in order to save the effects of this, you need to either assign back, like first equals first, and now it will be assigned, or you can assign to a brand new variable, const concat, if you needed to keep both of these as is. So that's a way to basically add everything in one array to the end of another array, is .concat. And now we have to solve it. Oops. So we need to, it's saying we need to assign it and then return it. Nope. Oh, the first array should not change. Huh. Why doesn't it work? Wait a minute. I don't understand this.
Only change code above this line, but then there's some code on line 11. Does that have anything to do with it?
Maybe.
Did
Let's
you
see.
enter that, or was that there? Or
How do I reset? Reset all code.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. That's what I did. I deleted the wrong code. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, we already, oh, push. Yeah, we already know this. If you push an array, if you push an array onto an array, it's going to be one element at the end that's a whole nested array. We already know this one. So I think it's just that. Okay. Oh boy. Oh boy. Now, not only do we have a giant monster of a puzzle problem here, but we are talking about the reduce method. This is the craziest of all the array methods. Yeah, so reduce is a way to iterate through an array. In this case, I guess it gives us a big giant array. See, array here, and each element in the array is this huge object, which is a Chris Nolan movie, it looks like. Interstellar, The Dark Knight. And each object has a ton of metadata about the movie. And what we're supposed to do, oh man, look at how long this explanation is. So you're going to want to try the reduce on your own when you have some mental energy, because it is a tricky one. But let's just really quickly, I want to just demonstrate what it can do. Find the average IMDb rating of the movies in this array. Okay. Yes, so IMDb rating is like a property on every item. So to do this, you could say average. Okay, so they give us a variable average rating, but we are supposed to populate it by scrubbing through this whole array, from each object grabbing this, probably parsing it as a float, and then adding them together and then dividing by the length of the array, because that's how you get the average. You add all these numbers together. So we need to say watch list dot reduce. Reduce takes a function, and this function takes two arguments called, Actually at least two arguments. It might take an index. It might have an index too and other things that you can use. But there are at least two arguments. I call them accumulator and next. And actually reduce takes itself. So the function here is the first argument to reduce. This takes two arguments. Reduce itself takes a second argument, which is what to start with. I'm going to start with the number 0. And you return some combination of accumulator and next, which is going to let you do operations on each item in the array of any kind you like. Do one thing with each one. You can accumulate the value somehow into this ACC. The next is the next item in the array. So this is going to be, and this will be very confusing, but next dot IMDB rating, and we're going to parse float that, and we're going to add that to ACC. So the accumulator starts with this special argument you give it, but then the next element in the array, the accumulator is whatever you returned the last time. So we're just adding up all of the IMDb ratings and everything by running one function called reduce. And then you can do return. Oh wait, I need to make average rating is that divided by watch list dot length, and I'll console.log it. Oh, there is a console.log. Okay. 8.52. That's a pretty good average. Is that really? Look, 7.9, 8.3, 9.0. Wow. 8.6, 8.8. Yeah, it's plausible. I think we got it. Nope. What? Wait a minute. 0.9 plus. Oh, no. Oh, it's a trick. This one's Avatar. This isn't the Chris Nolan movie. Aha. This is tricky. Okay. So not only do you have to accumulate like this, you also have to only do the ones where, what is it? Where the director is Christopher Nolan. So instead of just always returning the accumulator plus the next rating, we'll say if next director, let's see, what is it called? Capital D director equals Christopher Nolan, return this. And then else, and you don't even need the else because it will have already returned if this is true. We'll just return the accumulator itself without adding anything. So it will only add the items that are, yeah. And the problem is we can't divide by the whole length of the watch list. We have to divide by the number directed by Chris Nolan. So, I think, I mean, we could do this a couple ways. We could say const Nolan list equals this and not divide it yet. And then just say average rating equals Nolan list or Nolan. No, never mind. This is tricky. There's got to be some way to do this.
Can you use splice?
I could, but that would defeat the purpose. There should be some really clever way to do this whole thing with the reduce. Oh, okay. Okay, maybe not. They're saying instead of doing it all in one reduce or doing something like that, you can filter. Yeah. So we can just filter like this. Watch list dot filter. Movie. Return movie dot director and then we reduce that. And then we don't have to put our if statement or any of this. We just accumulate the float parsed IMDb rating. So we filter to this, and then we do this, and then we divide. Oh, well, no, Nolan list equals filter. That first part. And then return or average rating equals Nolan list dot reduce, and now we have the right length. So divided by Nolan list dot length. Man, that's a crazy one. Oh no. What happened?
You've got code under the only
Oh.
change code above this line again.
Yep. That I was assigning the whole list now and overwriting that and messing it up. Hooray. Wow. That's a tough one. I'll paste this whole thing in the pasted code if you want to try it, but wow. Crazy reduce example. Okay, so that's reduce. It's complicated, but it can do a lot more than just adding up. I mean, you're not just adding up the items in the array here. You're parsing out a thing and blah, 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 and then adding them up. So it can do all of that kind of once. Any kind of thing where you want to go walk your way through a whole array and accumulate one total as you go along of any kind, not just a sum of the array, like accumulate one thing of any kind based on that array. You can probably represent that with a single reduce. And it's very tricky, but it can be very powerful way of doing things quickly once if you get good at it, which I wasn't good at this. You know, I didn't even know what this was for like many, many, many years. And I might use it too much now because the next person who reads my code is like, what the heck are you doing here sometimes, you know? So yeah, pretty cool though. Okay. Yeah, we're at 7 o'clock. Let's finish a couple more. These ones are all much easier. Oh man, never mind. This is a super complicated puzzle. Wonderful. Can I just skip this one? Higher order functions to solve a complex problem. Or do you want to work on this one in the class? If you want to see some really confusing map, filter, and reduce puzzle, let me know. Otherwise, we'll look at some other array methods and save this one for later or office hours or never. Nobody wants to see it. Okay. It's, wait, Dominique? Anyone else? You do? Okay, let's try it. Cool. All right. I hope I'm as good a programmer as I sound. Okay. Now that you have worked through a few challenges, you get to apply them to solve a more complex challenge. We have defined a function here named square list. You need to complete the code for the square list function using any combination of map, filter, and reduce so that it returns a new array containing only the square of only the positive integers when an array of real numbers is passed into it. Only the square a new array containing only the square of only the positive integers when an array of real numbers is passed to it. An example of an array containing only real numbers is this. Should not use any kind of for or while loops or the for each function. It should be all magic mapping and everything. Now, here's the thing, though. I don't think we need to use reduce at all because it says it returns a new array containing the square of the positive integers. That just sounds like a map. That sounds like a new array based on the old array. So I think maybe reduce is just not even, or there's some fancy way to, oh, you could do this two ways, I think. Let's try to do this two ways. I think one way, you do it with a map and a filter. And the other way, you could do it all with a big blob of reduce. So let's see. Square list. Squared integers. We only want the positive ones, integers, when an array of real numbers is passed to it. So we filter out everything negative and everything that's a decimal. And then we square everything else and return those in an array. So this is filter first, r.filter, or we can just return this. Return r.filter x parse int x equals x, and x is positive. So probably not 0. X is greater than 0. So when we parse an integer, it has to be the same, meaning it was an integer to begin with, and when x is 0. And now I'll put this on a new line like this with some braces, just so it's a little easier to read, maybe. It's still going to be really gnarly looking. Let's see. Dot map x, math.power x2. So that's x squared, x to the power of 2. $25 and 9. That looks right. We did it. Okay, no reduce needed.
What about getting rid of the decimals?
So that was this part. This gets rid of decimals. This gets rid of anything not positive. And this squares everything.
I don't understand the part about get rid of decimals. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We'll look at it. Okay, so like let's just console.log 5 and parse int 5. 5 and 5. What if we did 4.7 and parse int 4.7? That's 4.7 and 4. Because if you pass parse int, a number that has some decimal after the decimal point, it's going to chop off that decimal.
Okay.
So when we say check that parse int x is equal to x, that means when you run it through parse int, it doesn't change it at all. And the only way that's true is if it was an integer to begin with, meaning it had no decimal to begin with. So yeah, if we did the equals, you can see, whoops. I guess you can change code down here. Yeah, false. I think 4.0, that'll be true still, because numbers, if you just look at 4.0 equals 4, it's still true. Like it's close enough. It actually doesn't, even though these look different, they are the same internally. They are the same number value to the JavaScript interpreter. They're literally the same exact value, even though this one has any number of zeros on it. It's fine.
Yeah,
So, but
in
yeah.
that case, like the 4.0, it really is almost like there's no decimal point there in this case.
Yeah, like 4.0 in the context of this problem is still an integer. It's still a positive integer. It's kind of weird, but I guess you could argue, yes, 4.0 is an integer, sure. And it's partly because of JavaScript's just weird way how every number is the same type and it just kind of fakes this parse int and stuff like that. All right, so that's the way with that's the method with filter and map. And I think, they were just saying, well, you can do it either or, because there's another way with reduce. And you could do a filter with this too, but you can do this all in one reduce. You could say array reduce. And here we get our first argument is this crazy function that has an accumulator and a next of its arguments. And the second argument to reduce is what we start at. We'd start at an empty array. So reduce can accumulate any value by going through an array. Well, it's perfectly okay for the value you accumulate to be another array. This is just going to become your accumulator. And so we can effectively use this to make a map. You can do if you wanted to map X to X, if you wanted to map an array in the way it's like X times 2, so that we multiply everything in the array, you could do that with a reduce too. It would just be a weird reason to use a reduce. But we can do all of this in one by saying if the same set of criteria. So parse int next equals next and next greater than 0, then we know we want to keep it. We'll say accumulator dot push x times x. I mean, you could do math dot pow x too, but it's the same thing as x times x. Or sorry, next. It's called next here. Next times next. And that should work too. Oh, wait. Oh, whoops, return. So you have to return it in each loop of the else, or just at the bottom, return ACC. So you need to always return from your reduce function, or else the next time it'll be undefined, ACC will be undefined and it won't work. Square list should be a function. What? Did I break it somehow? Let me copy all of this and reset. Square list should be a function. I must have missed. So it's saying square list should be a function. This looks like I missed some curly brace or something. Let's see. Else here, here, matching pair here, 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 here. What am I missing? Square list should be a function.
That comment only above this line, you've got a closing curly brace and a semicolon under that. Maybe that goes up a line.
No, that was already there.
Oh, okay. Why don't you try it, see if it changes it?
Try what? Deleting it?
No, moving it up.
Well, but it's so I can click here and see the matching brace is above the above line.
Yeah, I know. Oh, okay. Yeah, the comment, never mind. All right, never mind.
Why does it not even think this is a function? Let's see. What does VS Code think of all this? It has no problem with this. And if I did, ACC.push. Well, it starts as an empty array. What's wrong with that? Oh, here's the problem. I found the problem. I don't know why it says square list should be a function. That doesn't make sense. But let me copy all of it. Let me just make sure I'm copying just this, reset, copy into here. I mean, here's a problem. This expression doesn't evaluate, the push method doesn't return the array itself. So I need to do acc.push and then always return ACC down here. So this adds to it and then we return it back. So it's kind of weird that like we don't really even need, but that worked. So I don't know why it printed a cryptic thing saying this was not a function. That doesn't make any sense at all. So that was a square list should be a function. Somehow it's not a function when you do it like this. It fails that test. I don't get that. I think that's a bug in their free code camp. Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, let's see. Next challenge, what do we got? Sort an array alphabetically. Oh, sort. Yeah, sort is interesting. I'm just gonna paste this one in. If you want to sort an array, do you want to, this one could be useful, but this is another method that mutates the array. So see, the goal here is to return this array sorted in alphabetical order. So it's going to be r.sort. And this also takes a function. And this takes two arguments, this inner function, we'll call it A and B. That's the normal convention. And then we'll return it. So sort mutates the array too. And what this function should do is return a negative number. What is it? It returns either a positive number if element A, so every time this function is called, it'll be given two items in the array. And it should return a positive number if the first item comes after, and the negative if the second number comes after. I don't remember which one is which actually. So I'm just going to try it until it works. And it should return 0 if they're equivalent and it doesn't matter. So let's say return A is greater than B. So I probably got it backwards. ADC. I think you can do greater than or less than on strings, and it'll do like alphabetical order, I think. ADC, AZG should return this. What did it return? That's one thing I don't like about these tests in the free code camp. It doesn't tell you what you did return instead in your test. And my console.log, oh, here we go. Yeah. So it doesn't seem to work at all. How about copying like this? Oh, here we go. Reverse alphabetical. If A is B, return 0. Remember, this is our ternary. And here's a double ternary. So otherwise, if A is less than B, return 1. Otherwise, return -1. I think we can just grab this whole thing here. Maybe for some reason, oh, it's because you can't return true or false. This will become a true or false, depending on if it's sorted after or before. You have to return a 1, a 0, or a positive, a 0, or a negative. So yeah, this is why. So here, I bet we just have to flip this to get it to work. Yep, it's backwards now. So we just need to flip it going this way. And this sorts alphabetically. Yay. Non-mutating sort. Oh yeah, use the sort method in the non-mutating, or use the sort method in non-mutating order to sort numbers in ascending order. So that's pretty easy. Yeah, the non-mutating sort. So we can say new array, spread the old array items. So that's a brand new array. And then once we sort this, we'll be fine. Return this thing dot sort A, B, A minus B, because these are numbers, we'll get the right behavior of a positive, 0, or negative based on if one is greater than the other. We might have got it backwards, but this kind of stuff I can never remember. So pretty much whenever I'm trying to do sort, I don't even try to remember which one is A and which one is B. I just like say, okay, I need a number to be returned. And as long as it sorts in one direction, then I can flip it if I need to. So, yay, I got it right. It was A minus B. Otherwise, it would have been B minus A. But do you get why? It's because every time this number is bigger than this number, it's going to subtract to a positive number. If they're the same, it's going to subtract to 0. And if this one is bigger, it's going to subtract to a negative number. And that's all the sort thing needs to do its whole business. And, you know, if you just did ARR and A minus B, that's not going to pass because you've changed this global array by doing it. And they said, don't do that. So you need to sort of make a copy of the array, spread the original array's elements, which are all values. So it's fine. There's none of that object reference stuff going on here. Once you copy the outer array, make a copy of that. And then you're all good. So, yeah. Split. We've seen this. So use a split method inside the splitify function to split, stir into an array of words. The function should return the array. Note that words are not always separated by spaces and the array should not contain punctuation. Huh. You need regular expressions for this one. So you need to split by a space or a comma or a dash to fix this one. Let's see. And the tests are split this. You should get the word split this. And you get these. Oh, and a period too. Well, we can do this with a regular expression. So return str.split. Now you could split it by a space. And I'll log what that is. So see, the result of splitting by just a space character, you get an array from your string. That's good. You split it up into items and put each one into an array. And that's what you get from split. But they want you to split on like this and this too. So just putting a space character as the thing you're splitting, you're looking for to split on is not good enough. You actually need a regular expression. So you could do like this. Square brackets mean any one of these things in a regular expression. Oh, and you need to surround it by slashes like this instead of, yeah, we didn't even really go into regular expressions this class, but yeah, space, comma, dash, they're all fine. And then we also need a period, which is a special character in regular expressions. You also need a backslash period. And that should work. Yay. Now, another way you could do this is square brackets still, but this thing inside square brackets means not, and backslash W means a word character. So this is split by anything that is not a word character. That also works. yeah, if you want to learn regexes, there's a whole sequence on regexes. I'll paste the link to that that you would probably want to do before even trying this one. And yeah, I'll paste the link right before the break, which should be like now. I don't know how many left do we have. Join. Oh, it's the same deal. So what is this? Sentence from the words in the string should return a string. Okay, should basically replace all the dashes with spaces, but they don't want you to use the replace method. So you could do return str.split on a dash and join with a space. So it converts into an array and then converts back to a string. Split converts a string to an array. Join converts an array back to a string. And this one always takes like a character. You can't put a regular expression in here because it's you're inserting this into the array. On this side, you're looking for this to split on. So it sounds like we also need dots and periods. So we can do that, you know, with our non-word trick, or we could do just dash dot comma. And that works. Okay, I don't even know what this one is. Convert strings to URL slugs. It's like it's more regular expressions. I don't actually understand how any of this is functional programming. This is like regular expression stuff. So we're off into the, but let's just get the link to that, and then let's take a break and let's do some React for the last bit of class, and then we'll say goodbye for a while. Unless you, please come to office hours if you want extra help, or if you want to play with regular expressions. But let me get the link to that, just in case you want to spend some time on regular expressions. I know you all have so much extra time to spend on things like regular expressions, but you know, since we didn't have time to get to them in class, and since there's so much there, you know, you can start here if you want to learn about them. So here's regular expressions. That's the first one in the sequence. So let's come back at 7:45 or 7:40. How about 7:40? And we'll do a little preview of React, and we'll talk about the weekend assignment. And then I got to actually add the weekend assignment to Google Classroom. So look for that later tonight. So see you at 7:40. Time for piano jazz. Ooh, and I can play it on the stereo. Called Crystal Silence.
Yep, I think we have an album with that on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
The name of
My
the album.
husband's a big jazz person too. Of course, he went to Berkeley also for a while. So
Cool.
back in the day.
That's a nice song. Yeah, I'm gonna save that.
That's nice. Who were you saying that you knew that went to Berkeley?
One of my classmates from high school, somebody I went to high school with, he's actually featured on a Pitbull song, I think. The Fireball song. He's the person who plays the ukulele on the Fireball song. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that song.
Well, I don't know if it was made to like advertise the drink Fireball or if they're talking about something else. I don't even know. So
You said Pitbull?
Pitbull, yeah. Mr.
Is that-
Worldwide.
Okay, see, I'm 60 years old. I know some of these things are.
Yeah, Pitbull's sort of what 2000s or something. Yeah.
No, he's old.
Yeah, he's been around a while by now. Yeah.
Yesterday's lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I spent some time today working on my capstone because I still have to get my wireframing and stuff done, and that just seemed like the right thing to do today. But I will be back to all your stuff and homework and everything. I'll work on that tomorrow. So have no fear.
Yeah. I'm not sitting here waiting to look. I'm behind on grading the homework.
Yeah,
So
I know. I got behind by being ill and then it's just all and then so
that's fine. It's
but I
really
haven't
fine.
disappeared.
Yeah,
I want to really understand this stuff, and I'm gonna understand it once I really like see the video and I'm like able to think. So but anyway, my assignments have been scattered, but
Hey, that's totally fine. The important thing is that you do as many as you can so that we have like so that we have kind of a sense of where you are. That's
Yeah,
what we're
metric.
trying to get from the homework. That's really it. So.
you bet.
Need to just snag some dinner.
Yeah, I'm
Ready.
just having some yogurt here. I
Seconds.
did have a quick question. I started to type in the chat and then it cut it off and I didn't finish. One of those split exercises we were doing, I think it was 3 back from the last one that we ended with, talking about splitting the array. It was the one that had hello, world, I am code.
Yep.
So what it'll do is each one of those will be in its own array. Is that what that does?
So split is a function that takes a string as an argument and it returns an array where of strings, of smaller strings, of
Yes.
pieces of the original string.
Yeah.
And the way that it cuts up the original string is by finding the thing that you pass to split in the original string, and wherever it finds it, it will split it right there. And on either side, that will be another break in the array.
Okay, so if you could use that to take each item in the array and make it its own also, right?
You
I mean,
can't.
I don't know why
split
you'd
an-
want to do that, but,
You can't split an array, I don't think.
oh,
All right.
okay.
Let me check.
Well, I think, watching these videos and stuff, it'll all start to make more sense to me because some of it I'm sitting here going, yeah, sure, whatever you say. I don't understand what's going on.
There's so much of it. I mean, it's
Oh,
going to take.
I know.
We hit saturation on new information that any person can take in
Yeah,
pretty much every day with these lectures. There's something a little bit kind of
yeah.
Inherently we're sort of doomed to nobody's going to get all this stuff by the end of these for this
No,
module.
and like you said, there's things
Yeah.
that you run into, I mean, you can't
yeah, for
expect
sure.
that you're going to know all this.
Mhm.
Right, and where we're at, if a professional has things, so they should probably make the module a little longer, a little less intense. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe the problem is that when you're working on on this in a regular, like in a work context where you're doing it every day,
Mhm.
the stuff you're working on will probably only involve like one subset of all of this stuff
Yeah.
that we've talked about. You're not going to have code that has this and that and this style and that style and old for loops over here. You really don't want to. That would be no fun.
But if you
So-
bump into it, you know what's going on.
Right. So you'll probably end up, once you start working consistently on the same code base, and this will be true to some extent with the capstone, you will rapidly becoming much better and get a much better understanding at this subset of things you're actually working with every day. It's a craft. It takes time to get good at anything. But the problem is you don't know which ones of those things you might see.
Yep.
When you get hired, it might be like, well, here, you got to deal with this now. And if you've never seen it at all, that's no good. So,
Yep.
so we kind of have no choice but to do this kind of very kind of shallow, but very broad coverage of all of this stuff as quickly as we can
Yeah.
while we're doing this program. And it's kind of it's a shame. But
Yeah, it's kind of like that for all of the modules, actually. you
Yeah,
know?
I mean,
It's like,
one of the things to take away from it, though, is like, it's clear you can tell I only know some of these concepts actually myself. There are some that I understand very well and I can just talk about. And there are some that I'm just like, man, I've heard of that, but I'm not really that comfortable with it. And that's going to be true of everybody, you know? Okay, I'm sharing. So this array, you can't split. There's no split on an array. There's string split, but no array split. There's array join,
mhm.
and you can pass it whatever you want. And it will, let's see, like this. So it'll put foo in between each of these. A foo, B foo, another B foo. Or A foo, B foo, another B. Yeah. And then you could split that and you could do it over and over.
And join.
And that, you know, it's happy to let you bounce between array and string like that. But you can only use
Foo, foo.
join on the array and you can only use split on the string.
So let me see, you've got B foo foo.
B foo, B foo, B, because there was A, B, B, and I guess this could have been all A's. A, B, A. It joined with foo, so put a foo in between A, foo, B, foo, A. Then it's split by A, so it was A or nothing. I think it removes the thing that it splits by. Let's see.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd have A's in there and you'd be talking ubby-dubby. So you got
So
B
that's probably
foo.
empty string. So after it splits by A, I think it'll be empty string foo, B, foo, empty string. And then it joins those back with B. So it puts some B's on the ends, but there's empty strings after them on the ends. I think that's what's going on here.
But yeah, before that you had the A
Foo, B, foo.
foob foob.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
B,
anyway,
foob.
you're just going to get confusing. Let's do some
Oh, yeah,
React
it's
stuff.
just, this is like doing drugs or something. You could just sit and look at this code and get really high. So
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of my files here. Delete.
Right. I'm gonna
It's
mute
trash.
and I'm ready.
Okay, delete, move to trash. You don't have to delete them. You can leave them there. It's fine. But I'm gonna stay in this web scripting folder just so we stay consistent here. I'm gonna say control click on here, open an integrated terminal if you don't already have it here. I'm just going to do it again for good measure. This is the folder I'm in. Honestly, it's not going to matter where you do this part because we're doing it all from scratch. We're going to make a test React app. And let me know if this works for everybody, but I think you just do npx. What the heck? What's the X? I don't know. It's npm execute or something. I actually don't really know what it is. But this is what you run to make a React app. npx create React app. I think that's it. Now, if you want TypeScript, you can make TypeScript right here, but I am not going to do that because I promised I wouldn't do that. In the real world, I'd be doing TypeScript every time. Okay, so it should look like this, have some colors. Oh, whoops, I did it wrong. Please specify the project directory. Okay, so it's gonna make another folder inside here where we run it. So npx create react app my dash app. And it's gonna, whatever you type here, it'll be a folder. So then it'll do all kinds of stuff. If it's working for you, it'll do all kinds of stuff. Yarn, blah, blah, blah. It's doing this, bloop, like that, and then more of this, 34,000 of something. I don't know what that is. It's installing a whole bunch of stuff to do a React app. And you'll learn about some of this. You'll learn about Webpack and but it's just doing a whole bunch of setup. Like, look at all this stuff. 1,700 things, 2,900 things, this thing, nobody knows what any of this stuff is. It's somebody at Facebook makes this and they just do this all day and they know what testing library / whatever. Okay. So anyway, once it's
Gus,
done.
what did you type in? Gus, I'm sorry, this is Latonia. What did you type in for the directory?
I will paste these into the channel. That sound good? It's npx create react app space and then the name, and the tutorial says my app. So that is that's that. I'm going to also paste the TypeScript one because who cares? It's up to you if you want to jump into that. npx create react app TypeScript. It's really simple. It's just an extra parameter. So this would be TypeScript. If you're brave, you want to try it, go for it. But if you can't figure out all the new TypeScript stuff, just give up and do JavaScript for now. Because honestly, it is a lot more complexity that you probably don't want to try to take on before you learn, asynchronous programming and some of this stuff in the next 2 weeks. So, yeah, I'm doing the first one because I promised that I wouldn't do more TypeScript in class. The response to, this, it just prints out a ton of stuff. And then eventually it'll say, we suggest that you begin by typing cd my app and yarn start. And yarn is basically NPM, but it's a new kind of NPM, and we're just going to do what it tells us to do because let's not argue with the people who made this. So you should see this if it worked. If anyone doesn't, please raise hand or tell the chat or speak up. I'm going to do what it says. So down, I got rid of that. Okay. So we're at our prompt. We see this, happy hacking. Okay. And I will type cd my app, which is the same thing as, we have a folder here. We could open an integrated terminal in this folder if we wanted, but we might as well do what it says, cd my app. Now we're in this thing called my app. And we run the second thing. Yarn start. And this will do some kind of setup. Oh no. Okay, well, you're not going to see this. I am going to see this. Let me fix it. Hold on. Okay, so cd my app, you already did that. This should say my app. And then yarn start. And it will say starting the development server for a little while. This must be running a lot of code because remember how fast JavaScript was at looping through 10,000 things? Whatever it's doing a lot of it. Wow. Okay. Okay, so I get this warning that says Visual Studio Code wants access to control Google Chrome. And this is because it wants to be able to open the page you're working on. So I'm going to say okay, because I'm expecting this. I just ran, and this should pop up right in front of your, like this. I'm going to say okay. And this, oh, this is something I was working on for work. But you should see this once you're ready. A little spinny molecule thing. And it says edit src app.js and save to reload. Let's figure out, Susan, what's up with you? Yeah, so what did you run, Susan, in the terminal there?
It said, okay to proceed. I said, yes. It said, please specify the project directory. I did npx create React app. That's what I thought you said to do.
No, I got that wrong. There's another command that's pasted in the Cohort 2 channel. The first one is the regular one. The second one is if you want to try TypeScript, but I would do the first one.
Oh.
Do you see that in the Cohort 2 channel? Or Cohort, what is it, C2? Yeah.
Yes, the second one with the template TypeScript is what I want.
No, you probably want to do the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. The second one is if you wanted to try it with TypeScript instead of JavaScript. But that's that's for anyone who's curious. Don't do it right now because I don't know what's going to happen with that. So yeah. Yeah, I would just do whatever it says. So I guess for some reason, maybe because I have Yarn installed, it detected that and said run yarn start. It'll do the same thing. So if it tells you to run npm start instead, just do that. So Susan, is it like printing out a bunch of stuff now? And like little bars are going across the screen and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's definitely like installing or what have you.
Okay, you should be fine, and it'll print out the two things to type after that in a row. The first one will be cd my app, and then the second one will be probably npm start. I think it's just my computer, it said yarn start. It doesn't really matter. Yes, Karen, thanks for putting the disclaimer. This is so that if anyone's curious and is like, I want to try TypeScript, and then they have a terrible time, it's not my fault. We didn't say to do it. I'm just telling you how to do it. So,
Gus, I was following along, but then I had some confusion, so I closed out code and redid the GitHub thing and went back in. We haven't entered any code yet. We're just down in the integrated terminal, correct?
yep, we haven't done anything in a code file for this example.
Okay, so I guess I need to know like what I need to do. Do you have that pasted or?
That's in the C2 channel.
Well, I've got the, stop it.
You've got it installed? Do you have can you find this W7D4 web scripting folder?
I don't know if I have it installed. It asked me and I tried and I got some errors.
Just the question I'm asking. I'm trying to find out whether you have it installed.
So I should go into Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, and find that W7D4 web scripting folder. Can you find that?
Yep.
Inside that, is there a folder called my-app?
I just created it.
You created a folder called my-app. Okay.
So
Delete it. So do control click on it and just delete that folder. If it's empty, right?
Correct.
Yeah. If you see the spinning atom thing in your browser, if you allow it to open in Chrome and you see the spinning molecule, you're all set. And if not, if you're getting trouble, please speak up.
So we should have a browser open too. It won't let me delete it.
Cool. It should open your browser for you. Just just copy the one top command from the C2 file
Okay,
into an integrated terminal in the W7D4 web scripting folder. It
Okay.
actually doesn't matter which folder it's in at all, but you know,
it won't let me delete that my app one.
okay,
Let's
then
just
name it something else.
Okay,
Just open a terminal and see the command npx create react app my app.
mm-hmm.
Whatever you type at the very end of that command is the folder it'll be create. So call it my app 2. That's fine. Okay, I gotta continue though. So Karen, if you need to do a breakout room, we don't have a whole lot of time left, so I'm gonna keep going, but yeah. Okay. Now, you should see my app here. You should see, you can now view my app in the browser. If you go back to Visual Studio Code, this, here it is. Should be in some Chrome window. You should be able to see this. And now if you go back to Visual Studio Code and you open my app, just leave this, don't touch the terminal down here until you're done. And you want to close it or whatever, or you want to do some homework or something else. So this here means this is going to watch all the files in here, and you no longer have to do like up enter and run node this all over and over again. In order to see your changes in the browser, all you have to do is edit the files. So it told you right here, edit src app.js and save to reload. Okay. So in the my app folder, there's another folder called src. And in here, it says edit app.js. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here that's like CSS, this. And if you go to app.js, this is going to look a little weird. It looks like HTML, but it's a JavaScript file. What the heck is going on? Basically, this is just a nice way to work with JavaScript code. It's still all JavaScript. It just looks like HTML because what it's going to render is HTML. Now, one important difference is you can't say class equals in this mode. When you're doing React, you can't say class equals because the stupid TC39 took the word class away from everybody in JavaScript, so they can't use it. They have to use class name with a capital N. So that's a big difference. That's you'll forget that at some point and you'll be like, why isn't my CSS class working? It's because in React land where it's really JavaScript, it's class name. Otherwise though, you edit this just like HTML, it's gonna look like it. So if I change blah, change edit to say blah, and I save, you notice the bottom thing goes compiling really quick, compiling, and then goes to here. So if I command tab over to browser, it's got my change already. Blah says blah. And this is a link to learn React. I don't need that. I already know React. Maybe you want to keep this here, but I don't need it. So I'm going to delete it and save. And it's gone. Now, React works by having code modules which define functions. Usually, there's a couple of techniques, but the most normal one you'll see is functions that return stuff that looks like HTML. And that basically, through a bunch of complicated machinery, that is going to eventually be turned into real HTML in your browser. I'm not going to go into how. It's very cool, very complicated, very impressive piece of technology. And the tooling is very nice because you can it will recognize that this should be kind of like HTML. You still get syntax highlighting. Remember that class name thing. It's not class in this context, it's class name. But yeah, so then we see, oh, here's our ES6 exports. So this is, we export default our app function. Now, where the real power of React comes in is that your code modules can now be little bits of your application's HTML. They can be basically mapped one-to-one so that each code module has the responsibility of rendering some chunk of HTML and then handling changes, just like you can have JavaScript program. So this is like jumping way ahead of like the homework tonight to like, this is the future world you'll see in a couple weeks where if you, for example, I do control-click on SRC, new file. I'll say list.js, not the greatest name for a module because it's a little vague, but it's a list. And this will export default function. And the argument to this function is an object, and React says these are what are called the props of the object. So I can say list items and color. How about that? And I'll say return some empty parentheses. That's a nice style to do. Inside here, I'll do div, and we'll assume list items is an array. Now, this isn't TypeScript, so it doesn't know what list items is. It could be anything, but we'll assume that it's an array. And I will put some curly braces in here. Now we're back in JavaScript land, and I can do list items dot map item, and then we will return more HTML div with the parentheses. Okay, anyway, let's not get too fancy. Sorry about this. Let me delete this whole thing. That's how you would render a list of items. It's very powerful. You're not going to be able to follow this though. So I'm just going to say color, and I'm going to say style. You want two curly braces when you're doing style in React, and you would say color or background color. And it'll be the only prop. I'll delete list items. Okay. And I will open this up here, and I'll say height 100. You can put px in a string if you want, but React lets you just make it a number and continue. Width 500. And the point is that we now have, I'll put list, I'll name the function, but I'm export default function list. We now have a totally different self-contained kind of HTML here, or a component it's called. It's not real HTML. It's a self-contained snippet of stuff that's going to be on our page, and we can control it like any other JavaScript function. And we can, inside these special curly braces, I can say, color, my color is, and this is any JavaScript you want in here. But it should be an expression inside these curly braces that's inside this component. And then you go back to the app. Let me paste the entire contents of list into pasted code. Oops. And then let's say, okay, we go back to app. This is all a bit contrived, but I'm going to import list from /list list. And now I can use this just like a div, an image, a P. I can say list. And if you remember, list had what's called a prop, which looks like the attributes. It basically takes the place of the attributes when you're using this. So props in your custom components look like the attributes on all of these. And the secret is all of these are actually React components. They're just the ones that are built in that match the HTML stuff. So I can say list, what was it? Color equals, and this will be a color, FOO, that's red, bright red. And now if I save this and go back to here, there it is. There's my div. It's got my color is this. Something above it in the CSS or something must have a centered text. Must have set the text to centered because this text is centered. So it must be inheriting that CSS rule. But there it is. We've dropped a div. Now, let's say here's where it gets fancy. You're not going to follow this at all, but if we do const value, set value equals use state, and we will import use state from React. And I will say value equals value. And I will also say input on change set e set value e target value. And then go back to my list. And now we have a new prop called value. And we're going to say, actually, you can just delete this here and put it right in line. My color is color. My value is value. And now we go back. We probably want to put each of these in another div so they're on top of each other. Okay, my color is red. My value is nothing. If I type in here, all of a sudden, I'm setting the value every time I even change the text. And now that's linked down to here because the value prop is being passed into here and it comes from the app. And the value is part of this magic like use state thing. It's called a hook. So none of this is going to be things that you're going to become. This is all a bunch of brand new stuff. It's probably very scary, but I mean, this is like within, a month or two, you're going to be able to be building apps like this, with basically like the interactivity being this quick to add and this, it's very effective for managing it. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy because it's a lot to learn, but this kind of thing will allow you to make very, very dynamic applications that it doesn't just have to be text. It could be, like the spinning is a CSS only thing, but you can have sliders that control placement of things and text. And so like almost any kind of like graphical interface you can imagine is really possible with this. The question is really just how much can you do before it slows down your browser? And the answer is quite a lot, like probably more than you'll have time to do in your capstone. But anyway, so that's really just a preview of like how to do dynamic things. I could take that same value here and just drop it anywhere. I could say another paragraph with the value in it. Got to remember the curly braces to jump back to like JavaScript land. Yeah. And all three of these now are synchronized because it's the same value here, here. Yeah. And yeah, thanks, Karen. Like, you know, I hope this is better. It's better to like show you to get you excited, and it gets you more excited than scared, because I know this is all totally baffling probably to everybody. But, you know, this is kind of like what Joey will be teaching you in like 2 months, and it's pretty cool. Now let's jump over to like a much more familiar thing. Definitely not as fancy, you know, it's not as like crazy amount of capabilities as this, and complexity as this. The homework tonight is not to do any of this. The homework tonight is to edit one file, this index.html. It's also in the web scripting folder. Oh, and when you're done tinkering with the React application, you can do Control-C to just quit the server. Now it's done. So if you go to here, it's no longer there. So the server is down now because we did a Control-C here. You don't have to really, but I'm going to do that. So here is the homework assignment. The homework assignment is, it's just an HTML page. If you, oh, I think it's 27. I think I got that wrong, but too bad, it's the wrong number. This homework assignment is an HTML page. It has some divs. It has an input. This is all real HTML. This isn't crazy. Yeah, Karen, it kind of is. It's called JSX. That's their branded name. And it's kind of like XML, JSX. It's kind of like a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it's a proper full effort to make writing JavaScript, because what happened along the way, like part of the history of this, is what happened along the way is people started doing what your homework is doing, okay? So the homework is, you have real HTML. This is all real. This is a real HTML file. It's got an input, this ID of my input. It's got a button with the ID of my button. I don't know if you've seen the on-click handler yet, but this is an attribute, a very old school style of making JavaScript run when you click a button. I'm not sure if you saw this in an earlier class, but basically what this means is when this button is clicked, this attribute, this is just built into HTML, JavaScript from the start. This thing is going to run, it's going to look for a function that is visible in the global scope. So there's your first problem. You have to put any of these things all in the global scope for you to click on them. And then you have to, for some reason, you put the parentheses here, even though this is not really JavaScript. But on click, you're going to run my button handler. And down here, we have a script tag, which means from here to here is all JavaScript. It's like the reverse. This is the other one, the React one, is HTML like inside JavaScript. And the old school way is JavaScript inside HTML. Karen, what's RPM build?
That's supposed to be NPM.
Oh, RPM is Red Hat Package Manager.
Yeah, no, it's apparently Zoom likes to change a lot of things along the way when you're typing. Or at least for me it does. I always have to look, like double check.
Okay. And yeah, NPM build is fine. It will just take like many minutes, right?
Well, NPM, I was always under the impression that the build is to get you ready for production, like so that like you're deploying your app.
Yeah, you know, you shouldn't have to do that for a long time. And that's,
No.
Yeah, that's also going to take like 5 minutes or something, and it won't do anything useful, right?
Yeah, they don't need to, I mean, it'll always be there. Every time they run npm or yarn start, depending on what they had to use, it'll always say that, and it'll say, you're in development, but if you want it to go to production, you need to run npm or yarn build. And
Yeah,
you
don't
not
do
wanna
that.
do that.
Don't do that unless somebody has told you to do that, because
Right.
you got to know what production means and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So, yeah.
please don't run that.
Yeah. All right. Back to, so anyway, this file index.html is HTML. Inside it has a script tag. The script tag has this function, a global function, because this is at the top scope. This is truly global scope. It's not a node module. It's not an ES6 module. This is an old school function in the global scope. So everywhere in the whole program, anything running on this page can see the name my button handler, and it's this function. You need that because your button on click attribute has to refer to some global function. And then I don't know if you guessed this, but when you click the button, it's going to run the function. This is the simplest way to make actions on a page link up to JavaScript and run JavaScript. What happened is that basically it started being like such a spaghetti kind of path where, you'd click JavaScript, the JavaScript can manipulate the page, because remember the Lady Gaga thing, you can move things around, you can create divs, you can do all of this with just running raw JavaScript. And then so people would make the JavaScript update the page, and then the page would have to call back to the JavaScript. And that whole kind of process became so messy and difficult to understand that a bunch of people were like, well, let's start building, organized stuff. So we'll take a fragment of HTML and then some JavaScript that runs with it. And the whole thing will be kind of stitched together with JavaScript, but it will render this stuff. And then other people were like, no, let's write little expressions inside a fake HTML that does. So people have been trying to stitch these things together for many, many years. And React is like just the current very popular method of doing that. It's going to be around for a long time because it has such an enormous amount of market share. And the same is true of some other technologies. I mean, I bet Angular will be around for a long time. It's definitely not nearly as popular as React, but these methods of kind of stitching together JavaScript and HTML have been developed for a long time. And the current way that people like doing it in more often in modern applications, the way that people like doing it is the React way. So this way, it's HTML controls everything and JavaScript is here, except when the JavaScript happens to rewrite stuff. This is easier to understand and start with, maybe. And it doesn't have a whole bunch of npx weird install this 37,000 packages, but as you build out a larger, more complicated app, this gets very hard to reason about. So we're introducing this because you really should be adding some JavaScript to try this out, to start understanding the interaction between JavaScript and web pages. And the weekend project, I just posted this. The weekend project is to try doing anything like this in your capstone. So take a page in your capstone and take a button or something in there and add something that runs JavaScript. You're going to need a handler like this, an on-click attribute, right, which refers to a global JavaScript function. And then somewhere in the page, you need a script tag that has that JavaScript function. So you can copy it right out of this example. But the homework for tonight is to just change this example. So instead of just console.logging, you can also assign to inner HTML. And I think you can assign to value. And actually anything on the page, you can change its value. You can append things to the page. And we haven't gone into much of that, but the only assignment for tonight is to change this so instead of logging the value, it sets the value as the value of this paragraph here. And that is my display in JavaScript because we've selected it with this. So to run this, you can do Control click. And I think, can you just do open with? It doesn't like that. All right, well, you can control click on the folder W7D4, reveal in Finder, and then just double click index.html. And that should open it in the browser like this. And typing is possible in this input. I'm going to close this here. Oh, and I'm in Safari, not Chrome. So typing here is just a normal HTML input. Clicking the button should run our function. But right now, the only thing the function does is console.logit. So you go to, in Safari, it's develop. In Chrome, it's view and then developer. But either way, we can do JavaScript console. And when you click, you can see it's printing out the input value, the value it got from here, and the value that you're supposed to change. Also, the displayed value, right now it's just empty string. And it's just logging those two to the console. So the homework assignment tonight is when you click the button, it should set the displayed value to be the same as to equal the input value. And it's just a very simple thing. The homework for the weekend is to do something like this on your capstone page. So it doesn't matter what it is. It's just, please add some JavaScript. It could do the same exact kind of thing as this. It could do, if you want to look up other things that you can do, there's on click attribute. You can just look it up. You probably want to put the word attribute. And this is all old school. Look how old school all this stuff. Button on click. You could do on, what is it? On key down or on change input. Yeah, on change event. So a select or an input has a similar thing where it can run a function whenever it changes. That's called on change. You don't have to do that. You could just do a button that you click and keep it the same as the homework. But yeah, the homework is to make this function actually change the value of my display element. And the weekend project is to do anything like this on one of your capstone pages. And of course, I'll be here on Saturday for the office hours, and you can ask for help with either one of those or other stuff, or say, hey, I was been tinkering with React instead, and I want help with that. Or, I want help with free code camp, other homework, other projects, anything. And let me know if you want one-on-one time too. I think I realized my calendar is not even working, like my Calendly or something. I got to figure that out with Dana. But send me a message on Slack if you need or want to try doing some one-on-one time this weekend. But I'll be there Saturday at 11. And really thank you everyone for all of your hard work. This has been a tough couple of weeks, and I'm really happy so many people are still here at the end of it. That's awesome. And I hope this is the hardest week, because it's pretty rough, but there's going to be some tricky stuff next, but I think it starts getting easier from here. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. Any questions, or see you Saturday, or see you in a couple of weeks. Yeah, I think we're good. We can end here, but stick around if you got questions. Come by Saturday if you got questions. Have a good night.
You too, Gus. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Karen. She was direct messaging back and forth, helping me.
Nice. You got it working?